Everyone in the
You
massive
think you
rehearsal
can
hall
sing?
knew the rules. Don't
Try
speak,
me.
unless spoken to. Don't look directly at the star, and most importantly, don't interrupt rehearsal when Aria Vale, the world-famous singer with awards, lining her penthouse, walls and arrogance stitched into every breath she took, was warming up her voice because this wasn't just a hall, it was her kingdom. And today, as sunlight poured through the high glass windows and reflected off-polished marble floors, the quiet hum of anticipation was broken not by applause, but by the soft squeak of a mop dragged slowly across the far end of the room, where a janitor named Eli Mercer worked silently, unnoticed by most, his faded uniform hanging loosely on a body worn not by age, but by years of swallowed dreams. And while Aria rehearsed scales with irritation snapping at her, assistance for every minor flaw, Eli hummed softly under his breath, barely audible, a tune so old and soulful it seemed to rise from somewhere deeper than memory. And that hum, gentle, imperfect, real, floated across the room and reached Aria's ears like an insult, causing her to stop mid-note, her face tightening as if someone had scratched a diamond, and she turned sharply, eyes narrowing on the janitor like a predator spotting movement. And in that moment, the entire room froze. Because when Aria Vale stopped singing, it usually meant someone was about to be humiliated. And she laughed, not a warm laugh, but a sharp, slicing one, and said loudly, "Is the help singing?" causing a ripple of uncomfortable chuckles from staff, who feared her more than they respected her. And Eli froze, gripping his mop tighter, eyes lowering as he murmured an apology. But Aria wasn't finished. Because power feeds on vulnerability, and she walked toward him slowly in heels that echoed like judgment, circling him as if inspecting a broken object, asking where he learned to sing like that, to which Eli quietly replied that he never learned, that he just loved music. And that was when Aria smiled the cruelest smile of all, because love without status offended her, and she clapped her hands loudly, announcing that since everyone was here, it would be fun to hear the janitor sing properly, right there alone under the spotlight. And before Eli could refuse, security nudged him forward, the lights shifted, and suddenly the man who spent his nights cleaning spilled champagne and discarded egos stood center stage where legends usually stood, his heart pounding so loud he thought the microphone would pick it up. And Aria crossed her arms smugly, telling him to sing something difficult, something worthy, fully expecting him to crack, to squeak, to fail, because humiliation was the punchline she craved. And the room waited, phones discreetly raised, smiles ready, and Eli closed his eyes, not to hide, but to remember. Nights as a boy singing beside his mother while the radio played low. Remember her telling him his voice was a gift, even if the world never asked for it. And when he opened his mouth, the first note that came out wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy, but it was pure. So pure it sliced through the tension, like light through darkness. And conversation stopped, hands lowered, and Aria's smile faltered just slightly as Eli's voice grew stronger, richer, carrying a depth of emotion no polished studio could manufacture, each note bending effortlessly, soaring into places Aria herself struggled to reach. And by the time he hit the high note, clean, effortless, trembling with truth, the room wasn't mocking anymore. It was silent because something impossible was happening, something no one expected. And if you're feeling that chill right now, that's the moment stories like this remind us why we're here, and why voices, both literal and unheard, deserve to be listened to. So before we move forward, take a second to subscribe to the channel, because stories like Eli's don't just entertain, they change how we see people we usually overlook. And what happened next would shatter reputations, expose insecurities, and prove that real talent doesn't beg for attention, it commands it. When Eli finished singing, the final note lingered in the air like a held breath the world was afraid to release. And for a long moment no one moved, because applause felt wrong somehow, as if clapping might break the fragile truth that had just been revealed. And Aria Vale stood frozen, her arms no longer crossed, her jaw tight, eyes darting as she tried to understand what had just happened. Because this wasn't part of the script. This wasn't a joke gone right. This was a mirror being held up to her own limitations. And the silence was finally broken not by laughter, but by a single assistant softly whispering, "Oh my God," which unlocked the room. And applause erupted, not polite, not forced, but raw and thunderous, echoing off the walls as people stood without realizing they were standing. Some wiping eyes, others staring at Eli like they'd just discovered buried treasure. And Eli himself looked stunned, hands shaking, unsure if this reaction was real or another cruel trick. But Arya felt something else. Entirely fear, because fame had protected her from comparison, from humility, from being overshadowed. And now, in her own rehearsal hall, a janitor had done what critics said she sometimes couldn't: make people feel something real, and she snapped, shouting for everyone to stop clapping, accusing Eli of rehearsing secretly, of using auto-tune, of staging the moment, because it was easier to accuse than to accept that greatness doesn't care about hierarchy. But when the sound engineer calmly stated the mic was raw and unfiltered, Arya's voice cracked, not in song, but in rage, and she dismissed everyone abruptly, storming out while the crowd buzzed with whispers. And what she didn't see was the producer lingering behind, approaching Eli with cautious excitement, asking where he trained, what his story was. And when Eli explained he'd never had money for lessons, that life pushed him into survival instead of stages, the producer smiled sadly and said, "The world almost missed you." And within days, clips leaked online, not to shame Arya, but to celebrate Eli, and the internet did what it does best, turning an overlooked moment into a movement, with millions sharing the video titled "Janitor Outsings Diva." And while Arya's team scrambled to control the narrative, Eli was invited onto shows, given vocal coaches, offered stages he'd only seen from the seats he cleaned under. And when he finally stood under professional lights weeks later, singing not to prove anything, but to share what lived inside him, the standing ovation lasted longer than his song. And somewhere backstage, Arya watched from a monitor, not with anger this time, but with tears she didn't fully understand, realizing too, late, that mocking someone's dream doesn't diminish it. It only reveals your own fear of being replaced. And Eli, the janitor once forced to sing as a joke, became a symbol not just of talent, but of humility, perseverance, and the quiet power of believing in your voice, even when no one asks to hear it. And if this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you that greatness can come from the most unexpected places, then subscribe to the channel, because every story we share is a reminder that kindness, courage, and hidden talent deserve a spotlight. And the next life-changing story might be the one you hear tomorrow. Months passed, but the moment Eli Mercer first sang under those unforgiving rehearsal lights refused to fade from the public's memory, because some voices don't just entertain, they rearrange something inside you. And as Eli's career quietly transformed from janitor shifts to sold-out intimate venues, he remained the same man who once mopped marble floors after midnight, still humble, still unsure how the world had suddenly decided he mattered. And it was that humility that made audiences lean in closer when he sang, because they weren't just hearing notes, they were hearing survival, patience, and years of silence finally finding permission to breathe. And while Eli's name climbed charts and headlines framed him as the voice found too late, Arya Vale's world shrank behind carefully curated statements and cancelled appearances. Her voice still technically perfect, still trained and controlled, yet strangely empty, because for the first time in her life, applause didn't reassure her, it haunted her, reminding her of a man who sang not to dominate a room, but to connect with it. And when fate finally brought them together again at a charity gala months later, the tension was thick enough to cut. Cameras ready, whispers buzzing, and Eli stood backstage adjusting his suit nervously when Arya approached him. Not as a queen this time, but as a woman stripped of illusion, and she apologized, not dramatically, not publicly but quietly, admitting she mocked him because she was afraid that raw truth might outshine perfection. And Eli listened, not with triumph but with grace, telling her that music was never meant to be a competition, only a conversation, and that forgiveness, like harmony, only works when both sides listen. And when they stepped onto the stage together that night, two voices from opposite worlds, something extraordinary happened, because Arya sang differently, softer, less controlled, and Eli met her there, not above, not below, but beside. And the audience rose as one, not because of fame, not because of scandal, but because they witnessed something rare, ego dissolving into honesty. And in that moment, Eli wasn't just a singer who proved someone wrong. He became proof that dignity can survive humiliation, that talent doesn't need permission, and that the world often overlooks its greatest gift simply because they wear ordinary clothes. And as Eli closed the night by thanking the crowd, he looked straight into the camera and said that if even one person listening felt unseen, unheard, or underestimated, then his voice was for them. And if you're still here listening to this story right now, let that be your reminder too. Never dismiss the quiet ones. Never measure worth by status. And never underestimate the power of an authentic voice. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because every story we share is a tribute to hidden greatness, unexpected kindness, and the belief that sometimes the most powerful voices are the ones the world almost ignored.